Against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. They become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed this to happen. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade, and it shouldn't be that way. And I have a great relationship with President Xi. I hope it's going to stay that way.
That's President Trump, who sees the communist China threat exactly the way it is. He told reporters about putting that extra 50% tariff on Chinese goods if Beijing does not reverse its retaliation of 34%. The addition would bring the total tariff on China to 104%, something that Beijing cannot afford. China is vowing to, quote, fight to the end in its response, even accusing the United States of blackmail. Joining me now is the Heritage Foundation Senior Research Fellow for China and National Security, Steve Yates. Steve, your reaction?
Well, Maria, this is a nice, healthy dose of Chinese projection. It's kind of astonishing in some ways that this challenge snuck up on them somehow, even though I think pretty much telegraphed from Trump's first term there was going to be a desire to engage in renegotiation immediately on all the terms of trade. But China's reaction, I think, hopefully is a lesson to the wider world. They want to hit us on soybeans and things like that. It's basically a message to farmers that in a time of crisis, China expects you to side with China, not America's economy. I doubt that's where farmers want to be. On fentanyl, they're pledging to pull back on cooperation. So they're saying they'd like to continue to poison Americans. Not exactly a great negotiating strategy. And they say they're going to pull back on Hollywood films. Well, who knows? Maybe that would finally free up Hollywood to do something pro-American and maybe tell the truth about China crushing Hong Kong and Tiananmen and all the goodness that they've missed.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, good luck with that, Hollywood. Look, I've been making the point for some time now, Steve, that the Chinese economy is much weaker than people realize. My audience knows, I know, we are aware of the weaknesses in China and the weakness, the weakened position that Xi Jinping is in. I reported this months ago that Xi Jinping, I was told, had a mini stroke a couple of years ago, and the Politburo actually took the military away from him, that he does not oversee the military. That was given to his quote-unquote brother. It's not his real brother, but one of his deputies. So, and then recently they actually took out one of his deputies out of the military. So all signs tell me, my opinion, that China is much weaker than people expect. And if you're talking about a 104% tariff on Chinese goods, it's over. They're not going to be able to handle that. They will have to bend to President Trump. Am I right?
Well, absolutely right. And this has actually been a long-term truth that America has always had much greater leverage and never seemed to find a way to use it. In an odd way, our large consumer market is quite powerful, and China doesn't have a lot of alternatives. And no matter what they want to block by way of American sales going into China, that will hit a few large companies perhaps. But the broader state of play is that China has a much smaller and weaker hand, and they are at risk at home, whether it's demographic, population change, but definitely financial institutions, and their dependence on this export model is profound. So yes, we finally found leverage, but we have to see whether it'll be used. So far, Xi's leadership has been willing to pick fights rather than negotiate and stand down.
Yeah, a different stance from others like Japan and South Korea who want to do deals with President Trump. Secretary Scott Bessent announced that the U.S. is opening trade negotiations with Japan right now. He posted this on X. President Trump has tasked me and the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to open negotiations to implement the president's vision for the new golden age of global trade with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and his cabinet. The Treasury Secretary gave Larry Kudlow more details last night and broke this news. Watch.
I'll reiterate what I said last week. For countries that don't retaliate, we are at a maximum tariff level, and it is my hope that through good negotiations, all we will do is see levels come down. But that's going to depend on the other countries. And President Trump is going to be personally involved in these negotiations, and he believes, as many of us do, that there's been an unfair playing field, so the negotiations are going to be tough.
So, Steve, your thoughts on where this goes now, and are there other non-tariff issues that President Trump can counter coming from Beijing? Because we know that they've been, undermining America at every turn.
Well, frankly, I think that Bessent might be the best Secretary of Treasury we've had in my lifetime, and he is the perfect person to articulate what this strategy is and to lead these kinds of negotiations. Also, Japan is the perfect target for where the priority ought to be. It is the next largest economy after the United States, competing with the People's Republic of China. So if we're going to have global rebalancing of investment, manufacturing, natural resources, rare earths, and things like that, the U.S. and Japan cooperating is profoundly important to reordering those systems.
Yeah.
It also kind of puts the lie to the notion that the Trump administration is anti-ally. This is a huge opportunity for Japan and the United States to fix things. That is the single best foot forward in countering China, in my view.
Let me get your take on Panama and the canal. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth arrived in Panama last night. A security conference is underway with defense leaders from Central America. President Trump is still pushing to take control of the Panama Canal back from China. But, of course, here, China is upset that the United States is about to take it back. Hong Kong-based company CK Hutchison's already did a deal with BlackRock. They were planning to sell the 43 ports to BlackRock-led investment group, including those 2 ports near the Panama Canal. But now that's in jeopardy because China is making noise about it. Panama's top auditor is now accusing CK Hutchison of owing $300 million in dues, Steve. This is a new one. Now they owe money because they claim they haven't paid their dues. But the fact is China's upset that President Trump recognizes that China has been trying to dominate the Panama Canal.
Well, this is another area where America is showing up where it hasn't in a far too long a period of time. And the encroachment that China's had in our hemisphere in many ways has been an open door. And now there's going to be a real conversation. No administration in forever has had a Secretary of State and Defense go to Central America and lay down what America's priorities are, show up and engage the region and tell the truth. And frankly, Hutchison has been untouchable for the longest time, and now this auditor coming out with these issues, Xi's government trying to say, no, they won't sell to BlackRock. Really, this is, I think, a good way to put China on its back foot. But America's got to stay engaged. We need American capital to show up to build this hemisphere, I think, as a great foundation for reordering the trade patterns we've had.
And that's an important property, right? That's an important shipping lane right there at the Panama Canal.
National security and global trade, 2 high priorities.
Boom. Steve, great to talk with you. Thanks so much.